Chapter 12, Part 2. The evening sunbeams had set the dust to dancing in the gloomy chapel when he arose. He folded his vestments, put away the hymn books, and closed the great Bible. He stepped out into the twilight, looked back upon the narrow little pulpit with a weary smile, and locked the door. Then he walked briskly to the bishop, and told the bishop what the bishop already knew. "I have failed," he said simply. And gaining courage by the confession, he added, "What I need is a larger constituency. There are comparatively few Negroes here, and perhaps they are not of the best. I must go where the field is wider, and try again." So the bishop sent him to Philadelphia, with a letter to Bishop Onderdonk. Bishop Onderdonk lived at the head of 6 white steps, corpulent, red-faced, and the author of several thrilling tracts on apostolic succession. It was after dinner, and the bishop had settled himself for a pleasant season of contemplation, when the bell must needs ring, and there must burst in upon the bishop a letter and a thin, ungainly Negro. Bishop Onderdonk read the letter hastily and frowned. Fortunately, his mind was already clear on this point, and he cleared his brow and looked at Crummell. Then he said, slowly and impressively, "I will receive you into this diocese on one condition: no Negro priest can sit in my church convention, and no Negro church must ask for representation there. I sometimes fancy I can see that tableau, the frail black figure, nervously twitching his hat before the massive abdomen of Bishop Onderdonk, his threadbare coat thrown against the dark woodwork of the bookcases, where Fox's Lives of the Martyrs nestled happily beside The Whole Duty of Man. I seem to see the wide eyes of the Negro wander past the bishop's broadcloth to where the swinging glass doors of the cabinet glow in the sunlight. A little blue fly is trying to cross the yawning keyhole. He marches briskly up to it, peers into the chasm in a surprised sort of way, and rubs his feelers reflectively. Then he essays its depths, and, finding it bottomless, draws back again. The dark-faced priest finds himself wondering if the fly too has faced its valley of humiliation, and if it will plunge into it, when lo! It spreads its tiny wings and buzzes merrily across, leaving the watcher wingless and alone. Then the full weight of his burden fell upon him. The rich walls wheeled away, and before him lay the cold rough moor winding on through life, cut in twain by one thick granite ridge. Here, the valley of humiliation; yonder, the valley of the shadow of death. And I know not which be darker, no, not I. But this I know, in yonder vale of the humble stand today a million swarthy men, who willingly would bear the whips and scorns of time, the oppressor's wrong, the proud man's contumely, the pangs of despised love, the law's delay, the insolence of office, and the spurns that patient merit of the unworthy takes. All this and more would they bear did they but know that this were sacrifice and not a meaner thing. So surged the thought within that lone black breast. The bishop cleared his throat suggestively, then, recollecting that there was really nothing to say, considerately said nothing, only sat tapping his foot impatiently. But Alexander Crummell said, slowly and heavily, "I will never enter your diocese on such terms." And saying this, he turned and passed into the valley of the shadow of death. You might have noted only the physical dying, the shattered frame and hacking cough, but in that soul lay deeper death than that. He found a chapel in New York, the church of his father. He labored for it in poverty and starvation, scorned by his fellow priests. Half in despair, he wandered across the sea, a beggar with outstretched hands. Englishmen clasped him, Wilberforce and Stanley, Thirlwell and Ingalls, and even Froude and Macaulay. Sir Benjamin Brodie bade him rest a while at Queen's College in Cambridge, and there he lingered, struggling for health of body and mind, until he took his degree in '53. Restless still, and unsatisfied, he turned toward Africa, and for long years, amid the spawn of the slave smugglers, sought a new heaven and a new earth. So the man groped for light. All this was not life, it was the world-wandering of a soul in search of itself, the striving of one who vainly sought his place in the world, ever haunted by the shadow of a death that is more than death, the passing of a soul that has missed its duty. 20 years he wandered, 20 years and more, and yet the hard rasping question kept gnawing within him: what, in God's name, am I on earth for? In the narrow New York parish his soul seemed cramped and smothered. In the fine old air of the English university he heard the millions wailing over the sea. In the wild fever-cursed swamps of West Africa he stood helpless and alone. You will not wonder at his weird pilgrimage, you who in the swift whirl of living, amid its cold paradox and marvelous vision, have fronted life and asked its riddle face to face. And if you find that riddle hard to read, remember that yonder black boy finds it just a little harder. If it is difficult for you to find and face your duty, it is a shade more difficult for him. If your heart sickens in the blood and dust of battle, remember that to him the dust is thicker and the battle fiercer. No wonder the wanderers fall. No wonder we point to thief and murderer and haunting prostitute and the never-ending throng of unhearsed dead. The valley of the shadow of death gives few of its pilgrims back to the world. But Alexander Crummell it gave back. Out of the temptation of hate, and burned by the fire of despair, triumphant over doubt, and steeled by sacrifice against humiliation, he turned at last home across the waters, humble and strong, gentle and determined. He bent to all the jibes and prejudices, to all hatred and discrimination, with that rare courtesy which is the armor of pure souls. He fought among his own, the low, the grasping, and the wicked, with that unbending righteousness which is the sword of the just. He never faltered, he seldom complained, he simply worked, inspiring the young, rebuking the old, helping the weak, guiding the strong. So he grew, and brought within his wide influence all that was best of those who walk within the veil. They who lived without knew not nor dreamed of that full power within, that mighty inspiration which the dull gauze of caste decreed that most men should not know. And now that he is gone, I sweep the veil away and cry, lo! The soul to whose dear memory I bring this little tribute. I can see his face still, dark and heavy-lined beneath his snowy hair, lighting and shading, now with inspiration for the future, now in innocent pain at some human wickedness, now with sorrow at some hard memory from the past. The more I met Alexander Crummell, the more I felt how much that world was losing which knew so little of him. In another age he might have sat among the elders of the land in purple-bordered toga, in another country mothers might have sung him to the cradles. He did his work, he did it nobly and well, and yet I sorrow that here he worked alone, with so little human sympathy. His name today, in this broad land, means little, and comes to 50 million ears laden with no incense of memory or emulation. And herein lies the tragedy of the age, not that men are poor, all men know something of poverty, not that men are wicked, who is good? Not that men are ignorant, what is truth? Nay, but that men know so little of men. He sat one morning gazing toward the sea. He smiled and said, the gate is rusty on the hinges. That night at starrise a wind came moaning out of the west to blow the gate ajar, and then the soul I loved fled like a flame across the seas, and in its seat sat death. I wonder where he is today. I wonder if in that dim world beyond, as he came gliding in, there rose on some wan throne a king, a dark and pierced Jew, who knows the writhings of the earthly damned, saying, as he laid those hard-wrung talents down, well done. While round about the morning stars sat singing.